is Justin Brannon, and I am the chair of the committee. When called on, applicants and speakers will come up to the front podium to speak. Only one person at a time should come to the podium. Don't approach the podium until vacated by a previous speaker. Speak into the microphone, please, and identify yourself and provide your address for the record when you begin speaking. Address your comments, questions, and testimony to the committee. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. It is unnecessary to repeat testimony previously given by others. Citizens may address the committee on agenda items by responding to the chair's call for speakers during discussion on each item and signing the speaker's log on the podium. All comments must be relevant to the item. The chair or presiding officer may, in his or her discretion, prohibit a person from addressing the committee and/or remove that person from the council chambers if that person commits any disorderly or disruptive behavior. Please see the agenda for more information about these requirements. If you're parked in the Sheridan Walker parking garage north of John Rex Elementary School or in the Arts District parking garage south of City Hall, staff can provide you with a parking validation ticket for you. The agenda and documents are located at https://okc.primegov.com/public/portal. You would then select the Downtown Design Review Committee meeting, then click on an agenda item, and the relevant documents will come up below the item. Keith, will you please call roll?
Brannon.
Present.
Copeland.
Here.
Blatt.
Here.
Surur.
Here.
Schmid.
Here.
We have quorum.
All right, we have a meeting. Next on the agenda is item 2, approval of the June 15th minutes. If there are any comments or discussion, now I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Please vote. Okay, motion passes. On to item number 3, cases withdrawn. There are none. On to item number 4, continuance requests. There are none. Item number 5, consent docket. Does anyone want to request individual consideration? Okay, am I making a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent docket.
Please vote. Okay, the motion passes. Next item on the agenda, number 6, case for individual consideration. There are none. On to item 7, other business. So we have SPUD-01535 at 415 Northwest 5th Street.
Thank you. Laura Griggs, Planning Department. This item was on your agenda last month, and it was continued at the request of the applicant, as you might recall. Some of you also might recall that during our meetings of Zoom, we had another SPUD rezoning on the same case. The staff report might look very familiar to you. The staff recommendation might look very familiar to you. This is a request to add one use to what is currently allowed in the DBD zoning. And the use that they want to allow would allow them to have outdoor dog runs and kennels outside, because currently that is not allowed in the DBD zoning. The site in question is up on Northwest 5th Street. Sorry, let me go back. Where I guess that's about 2/3 of the parking lot. They have an indoor facility, which is allowed. It's the outdoor use that's not allowed in the DBD zoning. And I'll just go through these pictures and then go back to the aerial so you can see that. We have office buildings around it. There is an apartment building across the alley from it. It is near the city's bus. I call it a transfer station. I really don't know what the official name is, sorry. And so in the staff report, you see what the recommendation was previously from staff and what the committee determined. And so when you look at what staff provided this time, you will see the exact same thing. This is not something that they're requesting a change to any design district guidelines or regulations. And from that perspective, staff doesn't feel that we would make a recommendation one way or another versus we have had some spud and PUD rezonings, mostly in River, where property owners want to zone themselves out of a design district. And in that case, we obviously would be saying, we don't support that. We wouldn't recommend that you remove yourself from design district. They're not asking for that. And because they're not asking for that or any changes to what you would review, staff is recommending that the following comments just be forwarded to the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission hearing on that is next week, next Thursday. We recommend that the comment that the proposed SPUD does not include language affecting the review process or requirements for changes to the exterior of the property, and that the proposed SPUD retains the DBD-based zoning district and all regulations and guidelines related to the purview of the Downtown Design Review Committee. There was only one other recommendation that the committee forwarded in 2020 that you see in the staff report, and that dealt with suggesting that the Planning Commission watch the meeting so that they could hear all the comments that were made by the citizens that and property owners that showed up. So do you have any questions for me?
And just a reminder, so during that Zoom meeting in 2020, had there been any of the changes made to the, so was this dog run on the exterior there, that parking lot already short like that? That spot location, was it already there?
I don't remember when that was put in. It was before you on August the 20th. The tenant's attorney that's here might know the timing of that. I think he does. Okay, so he's making that note. So you could ask that question when he gets up here in a minute.
Okay. Any committee members? Okay, anyone from gallery like to speak on this item?
Good morning, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. So I've mentioned this at the last hearing when we requested the continuance, but I think it's worth noting some of the history of this as to why we're here. I stand at this podium every week in front of various committees, and there are often times when my client is requesting permission for something that they already are doing without either knowledge or having gone through the appropriate due diligence, and we're asking for forgiveness. Although that may seem what is happening here, it's not. So my client doesn't own the building. She's a tenant. Prior to executing the lease, she on her own went and set a meeting with the staff to ensure that the use that she wanted to do would be allowed. She was told in both writing and verbally that yes, your use is allowed. Only then did she execute the lease and spend a significant amount of money building out the space inside as well as that exterior space. She then was told, sorry, we, staff, made a mistake. You're actually not allowed. That's when I got involved. We started asking questions as to why are we not allowed. When you look around downtown, you have, and we have some pictures we'll go through in a bit, but you have the 9th Street Parking Lodge. So the 9th Street Parking Lodge, which is right across the street from the Cosmopolitan Apartments, is zoned in the exact same manner as we are. There's no difference in the zoning. I said, well, how is it that the 9th Street Parking Lodge is able to operate? Staff then said, oh, actually, I guess you're right. And then I said, well, in Midtown Vets, and Midtown Vets has boarding capabilities. I know that because my dog has been boarded there numerous times. So they have boarding capabilities, which means dogs are having to go outside to do obvious functions. So that's when we said, okay, well, staff's not going to budge on this, so we'll file an SPUD. So the chairman, to answer your question, everything you see before you in terms of the exterior build-out was already in place at that time. we kept pushing as to this doesn't make any sense. Again, look at all these other uses, and we're told at that point, I think we're wrong again, if the dogs are on leashes, a la Midtown Vets, you're fine. That's going to meet the code. We said, well, great, that's easy. That our internal policies can just require that dogs be on leashes. Perfect, we'll do that. So we operated then for a period of time, and then we're told again, we made a mistake, sorry, you actually can't do that. So then we refiled a new SPUD, and I dug further into the 9th Street Barking Lodge. And what I was told was that when the 9th Street Barking Lodge opened, they went to the Board of Adjustment to get a variance. Now, that may seem normal. The problem is that is illegal in the state of Oklahoma because use variances are not permitted. The reason being, to get a variance to allow a use, you are circumventing the legislative process, okay? But they were allowed to get an impermissible use variance. So I said, well, great. We'd love the same opportunity to get that impermissible use variance. And we're told, sorry. So could we display those pictures of, I think for context it's important, and I can scroll if you want, but this is right, if you're familiar with this, it is immediately across the street from the Cosmopolitan, which is a very large residential. When we think about compatibility of uses, the thing that we're most often concerned with at Planning Commission, City Council, are whether or not the proposed use is compatible. And residential next to a non-residential use is of the utmost importance when we're talking about compatibility. So if you look at our site, we perhaps have that residential unit to our north, but the biggest use, I think, that exists around us is the bus station. The bus station is a very large bus station. It is a significant generator of activity, noise, all of those things. So we asked for the continuance last time to be able to sit down with an individual that was the lawyer for the neighbors to try to come to a compromise. Understanding that they don't want us here, we get that, but we think it's compatible. The number of people that live downtown and have dogs and utilize this service is something we think is important. So what we offered in a letter dated June 20th was to limit the outdoor time on that green space to 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then a break, 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then a break, and then 4 to 6. And so those 3 time slots would be the only time slots that dogs would be allowed to be outside. Now, in the process, and we're still willing to agree to that, we were met with a letter saying it's not acceptable, go build a building. Well, that defeats the whole purpose of allowing dogs to be outside. So we're still willing to agree to that. In this process, we were also told, which I think is the irony of all ironies, if we took the fence down, and therefore it wasn't an enclosed area, that would be permitted. Now, of course, that would be chaos, right? Because dogs would be just running everywhere. But I guess that's how Midtown Vets gets away with it, because they don't have a fenced-in area. They just walk the dogs, through downtown. So we've attempted to compromise. I think the use is compatible. It's a bit strange that we're here before the DDRC, because you guys hear design and buildings, and we're not doing any of that. I know how important it is to retain control with the DDRC so that if there is any future building, it has to come before. We have done that in the SPUD. We'll have to go hash this out at Planning Commission, City Council on the use piece, because that's, of course, what they spend their time doing. So we're asking for a recommendation of approval with the limitations as provided to allow what I think is a really unfortunate series of events that are no fault of my clients. But even putting that aside, if you look at the location, considering the bus station across the street, I'm hard-pressed to find that this use is a problem for the area, despite what you're going to hear from these folks. So we tried to compromise. There was no desire to do so. So we're asking for relief from the committee. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Could you tell me a little bit more about this possible compromise to remove the fence? You're saying that was brought up
Well,
by
staff said if there's no fence, it's technically not a dog run, and so then it's allowed. Well, I mean, that's
Okay.
logical, I think. dogs would just be running, and then we're just,
But they would be leashed.
They would
you
be leashed.
You'd be taking them out on leash. It would basically be an open area.
correct. Presumably, that's how they fit in the Midtown Vets. But of course, Midtown Vets is operating very different functions. It's a vet clinic, but a boarding facility. So the boarding piece of it is that. We're not a boarding facility. We're exactly what the 9th Street Barking Lodge is, which of course, they have a fence.
Okay. That's what I was most curious about. Looking for the compromise that will allow this to occur, considering all of the things that are happening. I thought that was maybe discussed with adjacent property owners, but that was discussed with staff.
The staff, yeah. The attorney for the property owners, his letter back to me was as simple as, go build a building. Well, part of the reason that people like to have their dogs at a doggy daycare facility is to allow them to be outside and play. So that just doesn't work.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to clarify one thing. When Mr. Bach says staff, that is referring not only to planning department staff, but to subdivision and zoning, to development services, to code enforcement. So we will do our best to answer any questions you have, but there are some conversations that have been had with other city departments that we were not a part of, just to make that clear.
Correct, yeah. I mean, there were assurances given at multiple levels of staff that what we were doing was allowed. So it was planning, it was building permit review, it was development services, it was the full gamut of staff that you would go seek guidance from as an applicant getting ready to go build a project.
Any other questions?
And I don't want to forget the city attorney's office either, because, they allow that impermissible use variance to go through.
Any other members in the gallery that want to speak on this?
We have several people signed up, and I think they have an order, so whatever order you want to go in.
Good morning. My name is Mike Berryman, and I'm the building owner right across the street to the south, 426 Northwest 5th Street. And so first I want to just thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak today. The first thing I'd like to address is Mr. Box's comment that we haven't been a good neighbor, that we haven't tried to work this out through compromise, because we have over about almost a 3-year time period now. And so much like the applicant, we have an attorney because we felt like we needed someone to be on equal footing with Mr. Box. And so we had that person speak as our representative in the last 30 days. But what he's left out of the equation is, for the last 3 years, we have worked with the property owner, as I mentioned last time I was here, just as a good neighbor. We've gone across the street, we've had conversations with the person face to face. There are members of my staff here today who have gone across the street on several occasions and had face-to-face meetings, basically with the idea that, what can we do to get along here? We definitely have a problem with it. You've got these dogs, what can we do? And there's been attempts on their part over that 3-year period to do things. We've also called numerous times by telephone. There are text messages over that 3 years where we've tried to work things out. And the problem persists, and we're going to see a video here in just a minute so that you can see how great the problem really is. And so during that time frame that we've tried to work it out, it just hasn't worked. And with good reason, because fences, trees, different types of trees, different heights of trees, don't stop the two things that we find most deleterious to us. One is the barking. And Counselor here talked about that there would be 3 time periods that they offer as a compromise. It just so happens, because my office is right at the northeast corner of the building on the 2nd level, where I hear the barking, I think, the most of all the people that work in my building, that in those 3 time frames, that's exactly when the majority of the dogs come out. They're not out there all the time. They let them out for about an hour in the morning, an hour about noon, and an hour in the afternoon, and that's when it's the worst. So of course we're not going to be for that. And so there hasn't been a way to compromise, because how do you stop dogs from barking? I mean, they come out, they're excited, they're in a new venue. You'll see from the video that there are approximately 20 to 25 dogs or more out there at a time. They're excited, they bark, they're not used to being around a lot of other dogs. And so how do you keep excited dogs from barking? They're not taken out on a leash. That's just a complete myth. I mean, you're going to see from the video there's no leashes. You're going to see that there are outdoor dog kennels built inside the fence. You can't see that from the street, but you can see it from the roof of my building. And that's where the videos are taken from that you'll see in just a minute. But there's another aspect to that, and that's feces and urine are being deposited on this green area that you saw, AstroTurf or some sort of turf, on a parking lot that was designed to drain toward Fifth Street when it was originally built. So you have dogs using the bathroom, and what do dogs do when they come out? They're territorial, they mark their territory. Most of them have been trained to use the bathroom outside in the yard. So they come out and they use the bathroom, 20, 25 dogs. And then, of course, it rains after that. And when that rain occurs, that urine and what's left of feces and so forth drain out onto Fifth Street. So depending on which way the wind's blowing on a given day, all that smell is going in different directions. We have people here today that are going to be opposing this, or in 360-degree locations around this site. And so I have with me today Laura Scobie, who is a person who's been our representative over the last year or two, who have gone over and met with the applicant and tried to get things corrected. We've had no success in that, and I think it's because it's just not possible to stop dogs from barking and using the bathroom. Now, as you can see, there's tremendous opposition here from property owners, tenants, employees that occupy these buildings. And I'd like to just stop for a second and ask those who are in opposition to please stand and be recognized. These people have given up time in their schedule to show up today and show their opposition to what's been occurring over the last 3 years. Thank you. Now I'd like to just stop for a second. There's a 5-minute video. I'd like to roll that. And then I'll have just a few other comments, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to others. I should have said that video was shot from the roof of my building by me, and this is just out of respect for your time. This is just 5 pieced together videos taken on 5 different days. But since our last hearing here, I've gone up on the roof most days and shot videos. So there are scores of videos that could be strung together for someone to watch. These are not hand-selected that happen on a specific day in a willy-nilly fashion. As I said, this happens at least 3 times a day, 5 days a week. I even came down to the office over the July 4th holiday on a Saturday, and it was going on a Saturday. So I want to just speak quickly about why I'm opposed. I mean, obviously, you've probably had dogs bark in your neighborhood, that sort of thing before, but it's very annoying to try to work in your office and try to concentrate with this kind of environment. And that the sound on that is not enhanced. That's just taken with a Joe Blow, $150 camera from the roof of the building directly across the street. So you can kind of get the impression of how annoying it is, and I think part of it is you have all these concrete structures around it, and the sound just bounces off of them. I can come out of the back of my building on the staircase on the other side and hear the sound coming through and bouncing off the buildings in the alley of 5th Street and reflecting back onto my building. So it's very difficult to work there. It's very embarrassing when you have clients who come to a conference room which faces the bus station. This business outdoor use is not compatible with a neighborhood. It creates a hardship. It creates a nuisance. It doesn't do anything to enhance the area. It detracts from it in every way. And we have had a tenant in our building for 5 years prior to the opening of the outdoor dog park. Since that time, we haven't been able to lease the downstairs, which is 50% of the building. We bought that building 27 years ago for our offices. We have been there for 27 years. It was shortly after the bombing. Oklahoma City was a ghost town. We believed as pioneers in the future of Oklahoma City. So we bought the building. We've been there the entire time. We purchased it not only as an office, but as a retirement vehicle for my wife and I. I'm 65 now. I'm at the point of retirement. And this is what I have to face with what I purchased as an income-producing property. And just one more thing before I turn over the lectern. Mr. Box talked about basically that they had followed the proper procedure and received written and oral approval of this in the typical fashion as they should have. And unfortunately, that's not accurate. The applicant filed for a building permit and was given a building permit in early May of 2020. Within days, according to her own testimony during the previous SPUD at 1244, which was recorded by Zoom, she admitted that 3 days after she had received a building permit, the city put her on notice that there was a problem. And that problem stemmed from the building permit, and the drawing that was attached to it did not show this outdoor dog facility at all. That application was for an indoor facility. The plans and specifications that were submitted were for an indoor operation. It did not show anything on the outside. It showed 3 doors exiting to a public way. On the west side, which is where you would let the dogs out. We saw that just a minute ago. Those doors no longer exit to a public way. They exit to an enclosed with fencing dog park that wasn't shown on the plans originally. The city put her on notice 3 days after she got her building permit, and plenty of time to do something about it. But she did not. Instead, she decided to go forward with a SPUD, the one we're here on today. I'm sorry, a SPUD 1244 in 2020. She sought and approved, got an approval from Corsair, the building's owner, to submit a SPUD. She submitted that in July. Now, all the time the construction is ongoing. In July, it was heard. There was significant public opposition to it. All of that was recorded. It was discussed by her and her counsel how this wasn't going to be a problem. Opposition talked about the potentialities of what could happen. Those potentialities became a reality. There's no more speculation about what will or what will not happen. It has happened. It has happened exactly like we thought it would, to our detriment. In August, that was to be heard and was heard by the DDRC by Zoom. It was set to go to Planning Commission for approval on August 27 of 20. It was postponed until mid-September. One day before it was to be heard by Planning Commission, the SPUD application was taken down. 6 days later, the fence went up. In the middle of October, she received a certificate of occupancy and opened. And she has been in violation of the zoning code now for almost 3 years. So she did not go through the usual process. Instead, what she did was just basically thumb her nose at the zoning code and her neighbors and the known opposition that she was going to have to this. We feel like that was not acting prudently and reasonably when she first found out after 3 days there was an issue. Instead, she rolled the dice and forged ahead, and that's why we're here today. So I'd like to turn the podium over now to Paul Penley, who will also address some of the comments that Mr. Box made, and then after that, Robert Robles, who will also address some of the comments that Mr. Box made, and then I think we're going to hear from 2 or 3 other property owners that are in opposition. Thank you.
You might wait just a second in case
Yes,
any of
I'm
them have
sorry.
questions for you.
Have any questions? And then, are any of the other, just for the sake of time, are any of the other people in the gallery speaking on anything different than what has already been spoken on? Okay. Okay, we can hear the next person.
Well, I just want to say one thing quickly. Someone asked, was this build-out in place at the time of the DDRC? And it was not. The DDRC was in August of 20. The fence went up in mid-September, and they opened in October of 20.
Good morning. My name is Paul Pendley. I'm here representing Dow Properties as an employee and a manager of several buildings surrounding the doghouse. I've been working in downtown Oklahoma City for close to 20 years. I'm very familiar with this area, especially around Northwest 5th and Walker. And I'd like to start by addressing some points Mr. Box made in his presentation. I feel that none of Mr. Box's examples are a good comparison to this particular case. Regarding Midtown Vets, while it is true, it does share the same zoning as the doghouse. It is an entirely different business offering different services, all of which are allowed under the current zoning ordinance. It is a vet clinic. It does not offer a dog park. It gives the dogs access to fresh air and sunshine by walking them through the neighborhood to various green spaces. And therefore, they did not need to apply for a variance, SPUD, or change of use for its business. It's simply not the same as the doghouse. In the case of the 9th Street Barking Lodge, it is also not a fair point of comparison either. What enables the Barking Lodge to operate as a dog park is the use variance that was granted prior to its opening. That use variance required a radius report, input from its neighbors who could protest or support such a variance at the multiple levels in action was heard. Unlike here, no one protested because at the time the use variance was requested, the surrounding areas consist of warehouses and vacant lots. There was no cosmopolitan apartment building. And I've got pictures, or you can look at Google View at that time and you can see it for yourself. That is the exact opposite of what we have here. Before you are a majority of the property owners, a super majority of the private property owners, all in opposition. The doghouse is currently, all in opposition to protest the SPUD because of the harm the doghouse is currently causing by ignoring zoning. And if they are granted the SPUD, will continue to cause to owners, tenants, and residents. Now, Mr. Box says this is the city's fault for initially saying the doghouse could operate a dog park within current zoning. However, the doghouse has had several opportunities to correct this mess and has chosen to ignore statute, citation, and just common sense. I end by asking what makes more sense for one person who isn't even a property owner to be given special treatment and consideration because of a minor paperwork error, or for the property owners who surround the doghouse, who already feel the negative impact of the doghouse violating city ordinances, to have equal protection and consideration under the law for themselves, their property, and their tenants. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions? Okay. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Robert Robles. I'm a previous owner of 411 Northwest 5th, which is the direct next door neighbor sharing 413 with 415. So my office is 411, was 411, and 413, and 415 is where the doghouse is located. I purchased the property in 2008, invested substantial sums of money to rebuild that property, and operated my home and my business out of it. If you look at this particular slide, you can see 413 and 411 to the east sharing a common wall with 415. I'm here to just give you some historical perspective that immediately, or shortly after, a building permit was granted to Miss Sherry, the owner of the doghouse. I dropped by her place and asked her, hey, what new business is going in? And she told me, and I said, you can't have an outdoor kennel. You can't have a kennel. Now then, if you look at the green area, basically it's a giant kennel. It's an enclosed area for dogs, and that's in violation of the law. I called Miss Laura Griggs, and I happen to be on first name basis with Laura because when I did my build out, I had to deal with the design committee, and I had to go through the design process in order for my place to meet standards and building codes, and then on and on. So I called Laura and I said, did they apply for a permit? She says, no, I never heard of them. So when the statement is made that I went through the proper channels, the first step, go through the design committee. She said at a previous meeting that she didn't even know that she was in the downtown design area. Well, perhaps she was not concerned, but she did not take those steps. Also, when she said, well, I've already signed a lease. What am I going to do? I said, well, it's clearly an illegal use. You want to use this place contrary to ordinance, you should be able to get out of your lease. Said she'd think about it. Did nothing about getting out of her lease, did nothing about changing her method of operation, and instead operated for basically 3 years by thumbing her nose at the law. Now then, we've previously stated, many of the homeowners and property owners stated to this committee in its previous form that we did not feel the city would enforce the ordinance against the dog park, which obviously hasn't happened very much, perhaps because of COVID, perhaps because of many things. But I'll tell you, it was a major consideration for me to leave my property that I had purchased, I had built, and I lived there, and my wife said, we can't stand the noise. if you look carefully, that common wall with the doghouse, that's where I live. I shared a common wall with them, and I'll tell you, the den, from the moment they open, you can hear one dog or you can hear 10 dogs barking all night long. Why? Because they're lonesome, they're in a new situation, they don't like where they are, they're enclosed, they're not having the environment they're used to. They bark incessantly. The property owner that I sold it to is here, Mr. Davis. He's going to tell you what his experiences were. I will tell you what my experiences were from 2020 until 2021 when I sold the business. And I sold my property. And I sold it, one of the major factors was because of the noise and the smell, which we were told by the owner and operator of the doghouse, smell would not be an issue, noise would be controlled, there would be sound muffling materials in the interior walls, you won't hear a thing. That's not true. We don't know, I don't know, what kind of sound muffling material it have, but it's 2 rows of brick, old construction, and it transmits the noise from next door. And I tell you, this is just the historical perspective. This is my personal witness. I was there. I endured it until I couldn't stand it anymore and moved. I'm still a practicing attorney. I did not retire. I go to court every day, and I have a business now, and I rent a space. When I had my own place built to my custom requirements, paid for, there was no reason for me to move other than this doghouse being there and the city not protecting me. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Have any questions for the applicant or for the member?
Good morning, committee members. My name is Weston White. I'm an attorney here in Oklahoma City. My law partners and business partners about 4 years ago built the building that you see in the top left of that slide, right there in the corner, that's it, at 500 Northwest 6th Street. We have practiced in Midtown for, I have for over 15 years, they have for over 20 years, and I guess one day in a lapse of judgment, we decided being lawyers was not enough and we would become property developers. And we decided to invest in that property right there at the corner of 6th and Walker. And it has been wonderful. We love being in Midtown. We love being in that area and the way that it has developed. We love having a professional space, which we are very proud of, that people come and visit, clients locally and from all over the country. It's a lovely spot with a great view of our beautiful city. In 2020, when we moved in, I was sitting in my office, which is actually of the 3 rectangular windows you can just see on that building. Mine is the top one on the 3rd floor. I'm not next door to the doghouse, and I am not next door to next door. I'm across the street and up there at 6th. And I can sit in my office 3 stories up behind a double-paned, gas-filled window and listen to those dogs bark incessantly 3 times a day, usually when I have people in my office. I will set a meeting first thing or last thing. It doesn't bother me when I'm out at lunch, but in the event that we have a deposition at our office or a mediation where we have our conference room full of people, which is on the south side of the building, if there is a pause in conversation, what's the first thing that everybody hears? Bark, bark, bark. I've had clients ask me about it whenever I was hosting them in my office for meetings. Where's that coming from? I say, that's the dog kennel down the street, which is a point that was well made. It is essentially a dog kennel. We have invested a lot of money to try and have this professional space. I and we recognize the need for a facility like this. However, this location is not the proper location for a facility like this. Up towards the edge of this central business district in which we operate would be more appropriate. Somewhere out where there is a more residential area perhaps, or in somewhere that is a warehousing area, again, already mentioned, very appropriate. Unfortunately, that is not where we are, as you well know. We can't see to the south, and I can't even begin to imagine what it's like for these business owners who are adjacent to or very close to this facility. This is a professional space with professional offices. And while this is a need of professional people, the location is improper. I have seen the proposed workaround and the proposals from the owners or the owner of that business, and I'm skeptical. Based on the history that I've heard this morning and some that I've researched on my own, here we have somebody who may have been ignorant of the rules prior to opening their business, but very shortly thereafter and before constructing this space were made aware, and they clearly didn't care. I don't know, perhaps they thought, well, hey, we'll build it and they'll have to rezone it for us. Well, that's not the way good government works, and I don't believe that's a proper use of this committee's time. We're here today opposing this spud because we would like the barking to stop. Thank God I don't have to smell it. I can't even go there. The fact that the folks who own and operate this business have behaved as they have, the fact that they have proposed these time periods, which is exactly what they're doing right now, carries no weight with us. And while we want to be good neighbors and cooperate with folks, we have not seen any sort of good faith action on the part of this business that would make us think that they will abide by any self-imposed rules in the future. They've, as I think this gentleman mentioned, they've thumbed their nose at the rules imposed by our municipality already. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Thank you. Again, in the interest of time, is there anyone else who has anything different to say other than what's been said prior to?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah, definitely. So my name is Zach Nash. I'm going to give a little different perspective from what I quickly heard. I didn't know that this was on the agenda, nor have I been asked by the business owner or applicant to speak on this item. My dog goes to this business, and I live a little north in North Oklahoma City and work downtown. And it has been one of the best uses that I feel of this space and access for a person with a dog to drop them off in this location and come to work and then easily pick them up. We talk about a downtown that you can live, work, and play, and that includes dog owners as well. I have access to location, and I just heard someone talk about the smell, and you're using these words that kind of build cases up of why this isn't a good use. And I can say I go there every day and pick up my dog, and I go back to this area that's on this map, and it doesn't smell. I mean, I don't hear a lot. You know what I do hear is, since Embark has their central area for where buses come and go, and a lot of foot traffic there, I would argue that the sounds of a dog barking isn't any different than the urban sounds you hear as you're in a downtown area. And so I support this SPUD from a personal standpoint, that I think it is a good use in an urban in a downtown area for our residents, for our downtown workers, for people that have dogs that live downtown. You know, I do know on the outskirts of the edges of the core, there are places and they are around businesses as well. It isn't no different than you look at down to the east of Automobile Alley. They have actually more dogs at this location. So if we're looking at a number and the actual sound, I would argue that the number of animals that are in this isn't as many as the ones at other locations. So I'm going to end on that. I'm going to keep it, I'm not going to ramble anymore. You're going to hear a lot of arguments about sound and smells and everything, but I think at the end, this is a good business. And I will say the relationship I have with the business, they are good stewards of that space and we're very responsive to their customers. And I am a very critical person that will hold people accountable that aren't and that I don't feel they're in good faith and making good decisions. And I can say from what I know of them that they have. So I appreciate your time and thank you for your service and dedicating your volunteerism to the city of Oklahoma City.
Thank you. Questions?
So, and I don't know if there's more people that are wanting to speak. If not, typically then you would allow the applicant's representative to respond to things that came up.
Sure. Yeah.
You have 2 or 3 more. Okay, gotcha.
Yes, my name is David Moss. I own the property directly behind this, across the alley. The apartment building here.
Oh, the apartment building.
Yes. I own the convenience store on the corner.
Right
And as I've listened to everybody, they talked about they bought property here in the last 20 years, and that's great. My family built that building in 1928. I've been here longer than y'all. So it is an apartment building. I used to have a lot of day labor people because they had to have affordable housing. But due to the dog park being in close proximity, closer than other than the gentleman that lived across the wall from it, I'm the closest tenant to that. And because of this, and I appreciate Mr. Box's willingness to limit the dogs to 2 or 3 times a day, so I should tell my tenants to only sleep on the off time that they're not, because I have day sleepers that work day labor. And because of this dog park, I'm probably sitting at about 20% occupancy in this building, maybe not even 20%, because I had so many people that work day labor, and they can't sleep because the dogs never stop. And the dogs are doing what dogs do. It's just, I'm the closest person. I'm, 12 feet away. I was here before everybody, before the people that put the dog park in. I was here before everybody. When I built the convenience store there 20 plus years ago, it took me 5 or 6 months to get approval because I sat in front of this committee and Rick Dow was on this committee, and they made me jump through so many hoops. I had to show them a brick that I was going to use. I had to do all these things before I could do anything. I didn't just go build the building and open it up and ask for forgiveness. I asked for permission, and I done what I was supposed to do. That's all I have.
Any questions? Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Daryl Davis. I am the new property owner that Mr. Robles had mentioned selling the property to. And so I have 411, 411 and a half, and 413. So I'm in the building that's just directly east. We do share a wall there. We were really looking, and I have my family here with me. We were looking for, a space to hang out, and there's a rooftop apartment there. There's an outdoor patio. We were super excited to be able to own a property downtown, and then also have the opportunity to, purchase this as an investment to rent out office space below. There's a warehouse space below, we've owned this property, I think, since October of 2021, and we've had the space down below the apartment for our own use, secondary residence. We've had that for lease the whole time that we've owned that, and we've not been able to get a tenant in there. I will say that the noise is unbelievable, and the smell that is permeating through the walls. If you know, I understand if you're dropping your dog off and on, and you're not getting all of the 24-hour. You know, in the weekends, people go out of town, which is generally when we would stay there. We've had to buy, you know, additional fans, noise machines to sleep at night. I'm just in very strong opposition of changing this use space. Again, we're excited to own the property downtown. We love downtown Oklahoma City, but it is absolutely killing the economic growth of other businesses coming in, and I'm realizing that firsthand for no tenants. And you've heard today that people are leaving that area. They're not coming to it because of the noise. So, you have any questions?
Any questions? Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would the applicant have a chance to respond?
There's
or-
one more speaker.
Well, I'm sure we've exhausted you guys listening to dogs bark for 5 minutes and listening to all of us tell you what our problems are.
Can you identify yourself, Rick?
Oh,
Just identify yourself and
Yes,
speak in the mic.
I'm Rick
Thanks.
Dowell, president of Dowell Properties. And let me just start by saying that I spent 8 years on the Urban Design Commission, which is similar to the organization that you're members of. And we were a quasi-judicial body, which you are, which means that you make rulings, not recommendations. And however, on several occasions, we were asked to make recommendations to the city council, which you've been asked to do. Now you said, well, why do you want us to make a recommendation on something that's not in our direct purview? Well, the reason is the city council has to act based on some professional advice, and the thought is usually that people on the downtown design review, or in our case, the Urban Design Commission, are people that have a definite interest in urban development and would be well qualified to speak on the issue, and that's what they're asking you to do. And it's worth noting that the last time this came to the Downtown Design Review, it was different people on the board. They voted 6-0 against the application. So this is the second time that our property owners have been through this drill. So what I'm going to do now is get down to the nitty-gritty of what's going on. First of all, you've got to look at the economics of the situation. First of all, in your packet, you'll notice that there's a 57% of the radius is in opposition. If you took the public property out of that, it would be 70%. And these are the people that are most directly affected by this. So you sit there and think, okay, the people that have put forth an objection, the county assessor values that property currently at $20 million. They value the building that the dog park is in at $700,000. So you've heard the testimony of people. So let's just look at it this way in terms of cost and benefit. If you reduce the value of $20 million worth of property by 1%, that costs $200,000. If you reduce it by 10%, that costs $2 million. If you reduce it by 30%, that costs $6 million. So I used to be a professor of economics. If you look at the cost and benefit, or who can most easily remedy the situation, for the property owners to bear a cost which could be as high as 30% loss in revenue and perhaps even more than a 30% loss in value, we're talking millions and millions of dollars of loss. Now, how can this be abated? Well, it can be abated in several ways. First of all, I'm a general contractor, and to enclose the dog park and ventilate it, it doesn't have to be built to the standard indoors of a occupied building. It costs about $50,000. That's one option. Another option would be just to reconfigure the existing building so the dogs can stay indoors. A third option would be to use a van and transport the dogs to a rented lot somewhere where you're not going to bother anybody and let the dogs run around and bring them back 3 times a day. All 3 of those things would cost considerably less than the damage that's being done. And I would say this, as the Urban Design Commission, I would think when I was on the commission, it's a tremendous amount of work to be on a commission. You have to attend so many meetings and read all of these things. I know that all of you must be dedicated to helping downtown design and get better and develop in a proper way. And so we really sincerely hope that you will recommend against this action, just as the previous body did about 2.5 years ago. Thank you.
I was asked a question by one of the committee members before the meeting, and I just wanted to point out that in your staff report, on top of page 2, it reflects what this committee recommended back in 2020. In addition to the 2 items that staff recommended, they had added the recommendation for the Planning Commission to watch the video, because like today, there were a lot of people that came in and spoke. But I was just going to read it because I ended up reading it a while ago. So the vote was 3-1, that if you might recall. And the one member who voted against this was one of our real estate, if I remember correctly, committee members. And so she was viewing this differently. And so the comments were sent. There was no recommendation. So comments were sent to the Planning Commission that the proposed SPUD does not include language affecting the review process or requirements for changes to the exterior of the property, that the proposed SPUD retains the DBD-based zoning district and all regulations and guidelines related to the purview of the Downtown Design Review Committee. So I did include that in your staff report so you could see what action was taken when we did the Zoom meeting in 2020.
Yeah, thank you. The applicant like to respond?
Sure. So, I mean, we did propose the time limitation. Obviously, that wasn't something that was interested in. We can limit the number of dogs outside if that helps them get there. One of the gentlemen said, the 9th Street parking lot did it the right way. Well, of course they didn't. They were able to get a variance that isn't permitted under Oklahoma law, so that isn't the right way. This would have been the right way. You also, as I was sitting here, there's that large outdoor dog park that exists right in the heart of Midtown, where there's always dogs outside. So these types of uses exist in downtowns. They exist in downtowns that have a vibrant energy because we have more people living downtown than ever, more people have dogs than ever, and so uses like this are needed. So in addition to the time, we could also offer a limitation of number of dogs outside. And the comment that they can't trust anything, if this were to be approved, it'd be approved via a SPUD, which is approved by ordinance, which means the city would have the ability to enforce this ordinance because it would be law. So if they are in violation of the times or the number of dogs, they could be cited and brought to municipal court to answer for that. So there is enforcement mechanism because it is a SPUD.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
So just as a reminder, you are making a recommendation to the Planning Commission. So this is not something like you normally approve or deny directly a certificate of approval. So this is just making a recommendation on the requested SPUD rezoning.
I have one question before we talk about that. So historically, Downtown Design Review Committee is reviewing the design of buildings, not the uses. So this property would have gone in front of us for a fence, for an outdoor dog run?
Theoretically, okay.
Or would have
Those types of things typically would not come to you. There's a threshold where things have to come to you.
But they would come to the office to be reviewed by you administratively, or a fence permit, or?
Correct.
And so do they have do they have a DDRC approval for a fence application for that?
No.
or-
I received a drawing with that. I did not receive the revision application. They had received approval for their sign, so they had an active CA on the property. They indicated they were going to revise it to add the outdoor stuff. They submitted for a fence permit, which is still in the system, but has obviously not been issued because they don't have an approved CA from me for a fence, and I have to sign off on their permit.
So the fence is not in compliance with any permitting?
No.
Okay.
No, and as you know, on administrative approvals, they get reported out on your agenda, so you would, and obviously in 2020 you weren't on it, but that's why we report out the administrative approvals, so you can see them every month.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, we are not able to police violations on this committee, but there are entities in the Oklahoma City government that can police non-complying built components that are unpermitted. So a CO could be tied to finishing off an approval of a DDRC CA. So they have a CO.
We
But they don't
have
have a CA.
had some applications that have come before you recently, some big projects where that have had a lot of complicated issues, where there have been conditions where they had to do something tied into the CO. That's very unusual to have that happen. As Katie stated earlier, about other departments being involved, obviously permitting is a different department. Code enforcement is within that same Department of Development Services, and so they have their rules and procedures for how they do their job.
Any other questions for staff? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Just to clarify, there's really nothing that we are ruling on then.
Well, no. Staff is recommending.
No,
By all means, you all can disagree with me
no, I
and go
mean,
one way or another definitively if you feel that's appropriate.
I'd like to just say one thing quickly. We would urge you to send a recommendation to Planning Commission next week that you're opposed to this. I mean, you've heard about all the circumnavigation of the laws, and I respect that we can try to take action through the city. We have been trying to take that action now for almost 3 years. It went pretty much unaddressed until this past March when they were finally cited. If not but for that citation, we would not be here on another spot application. That's the only thing that forced the issue. And if we don't address this now, this is just going to go on into the future as it has been. And so we are here as citizens to have this heard by our government, for you to make a solid recommendation that you've heard this. I mean, we've all spent over an hour talking about this, that this does not fit with the zoning code and should be rejected. And we would like to have that message sent to the next level. Thank you.
So I was going to state that you all are not approving or denying anything today. You're making a recommendation. Staff has taken basically a neutral position because what's before you doesn't change anything about the design district itself or any regulations related to the design, setbacks, heights, et cetera. All of those things are left the same, and all that is changing is a use. However, you could take not a neutral position on the use, particularly if you felt like it was either an adverse effect or a positive effect and a benefit to the district. If you felt like a request to change the allowed use was something that was beneficial to the district and we should support it, you could certainly recommend approval. If you felt like that adding that use in was detrimental, you could recommend a denial. But we've tried to kind of keep our position focused on the impact to what this committee's purview is, so.
Thank you, Katie.
I think the part that honestly is confusing to me is that there is a design change. It was previously a parking lot before, is now not a parking lot. So I think that's where the wording for the staff recommendation is a little confusing to me. And there's a fence there that's not supposed to be there, and I mean, those sound like design changes.
So that would likely be handled after this is all said and done with following up to get the appropriate CA, building permits, fence permit, et cetera, for any work that has been done that hasn't been permitted. And I can't tell you right now if any of that was included in their citation or if the citation is limited to the use.
Would any of
that would be through a separate kind of
Would
channel.
any of those items not being complete affect the SPUD?
Okay, can you repeat
Say that
that
again.
question?
Like
'Cause,
any of
yeah.
those items that are not completed, the fence permit, the CO, all of these items, would that affect the SPUD being approved?
They can get a SPUD approved despite having other outstanding issues.
They can have outstanding
Yep.
issues.
And legal can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but my understanding is that is kind of running on two separate tracks.
Okay.
And it's my understanding right now that, because I've looked at what was in the system, there hasn't been any citation issued for the fence. It all dealt with the dogs being outside.
Thank you.
Similar to the fence, there's nothing with respect to the surface that's been done over the top of the parking lot. That would be similar to, I mean, there's been times whenever we've had conversations about surface material in the right-of-way. There's been no permit or,
No.
and would there be, if that surface was installed over a parking lot and the fence was not there, would the surface be in conflict with any code or ordinance?
I'm sorry, I lost you there at the end.
Would the surface be non-compliant? Would putting that surface over a parking lot be existing non-compliant?
We have had discussions on other projects about artificial, I want to call it AstroTurf, but this has gone way far beyond AstroTurf for that type of surface on projects. And we've, in a few cases, we've brought them before the committee to make a determination, because I don't have anything in my regulations or guidelines that actually speaks to that, so.
But when those surfaces come before us, it's a pretty extensive discussion about the cross-section of the surface, how it drains, how it mitigates everything that gets put on it.
Right.
It's not a surface, and specifically with respect to precedent, there was a lot of conversation about if we are going to consider an artificial surface, it would, in order to explain why, there was a really detailed conversation about how it would perform, and this would not be that way if it's directly over AstroTurf. I mean, directly over asphalt.
Correct.
Okay.
Am I entertaining a motion or further comments?
So this is scheduled for the Planning Commission for next Thursday. Because it was also continued last month when it was continued at this meeting. So I would suggest that we have some action by the committee that might allow this to continue on.
A couple of things that I think come into play here. We have two existing non-compliant, potentially existing non-compliant conditions with respect to the construction that's occurred. We have a fence that's existing non-compliant, we have a surface that's existing non-compliant. If it's behind a fence, it's a different discussion, but if the fence goes away, that's incorrect. I do understand the conversation about how we got here, but ultimately, if there are other places that have existing non-compliant functions, that doesn't mean that we would want to change codes, ordinances to make an existing non-compliant function appropriate here, the use. Any other comment? I'm going to move that we recommend against the current use and the two existing non-compliant elements on the property, specifically the fence and the surface, to be forwarded to the Planning Commission. However, that should properly be worded.
So I think you would be recommending denial of SPUD 01535, and perhaps because the Planning Commission is not really considering those two features, they don't review and approve those, but it could be with the comment that there are existing non-conforming features at the site, specifically the fence and the artificial turf.
And similar to the last SPUD, I'd like to recommend that Planning Commission watch the entire proceedings, all the conversations that happened, and take that into consideration when they're reviewing this case.
I'd like to second that motion. Copeland second.
Okay, motion passes.
So just to clarify, because the recommendation was denial and it passed, but so the recommendation is for denial of the SPUD to the Planning Commission with reference to the the fence and the turf, and then you also, I would add the wording that you added in 2020 about suggesting Planning Commission watch this meeting so that they could hear the discussion. Okay.
Next on the agenda is item 8, communications. There are 7 items under the administrative approval report. Are there any comments from the planning department?
Yes, I just want to point out that we have 3 new houses going in. They're 4 stories tall, up on 9th Street, which for those of us that have been around for a while and that are familiar with that area, there was a house in terrible shape for a very long time. Hang on just a second, please. There was a house that sat there for a very long time, and a gentleman that lived on the property, he owned it, and they were able to, for those people worried about him, the family has relocated him to Texas, and so the property was sold, and we have 3 new houses getting ready to start under construction up there, so I'm excited about that one. The small Goodwill building is finally going to come down. You all had approved that several years ago, and it didn't get torn down before the CA expired, so hopefully soon. It's got the Midwest Wrecking initials on it, so it should be coming down on that. And then there was just a couple of projects. One is up on 12th Street at the railroad tracks, the Cane's Coffee Building. Their CA expired, and so they hadn't finished the work, and so what this is showing is what they had left to do, but it's getting close. So if you haven't been up there lately, go up and look at it. We've got a lot of work going on that block, and that's real exciting that that's going on. So we're now morphing into comments from staff. So you'll be getting a quorum call from me because we have items on your agenda for next month. Hopefully not controversial, but there are a couple of items, and with that, that's all for me. I don't know if Katie has anything. I thank you, Katie. Katie's on vacation this week, and I appreciate you coming in.
I'm invisible. You can't.
Yes, she's
I'm not
totally
really, I'm
invisible.
not really
She's not
here.
here.
Okay, any questions for staff? Any comments from committee members before closing? Okay, next regular committee meeting is Thursday, August 17th, 2023. New applications were to be submitted to staff by 4 p.m. Tuesday, July 18th, 2023. Revisions and information on continued projects are to be submitted by July 25th, 2023. Thank you all for your participation. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.